The Washington Post. This has been a big deal, and this has really been happening and playing out in front of our eyes. And it is a thing. It is a thing. The Washington Post refused to endorse Kamala Harris or to put out an endorsement at all. But the Washington Post is owned by who? Jeff Bezos. Make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. Let's get to it.
It was an election tradition for the past 30 years, but now the Washington Post says the paper will be, quote, returning to their roots of not making presidential endorsements. The Post publisher, William Lewis, says this decision is, quote, consistent with the values the Post has always stood for. However, according to reports, the paper was ready to endorse Vice President Harris, but billionaire owner Jeff Bezos nixed it. It comes as the LA Times is facing fallout for its own decision to not endorse either candidate. But not all publications are stepping out of the race. News Nation's Caitlin Becker has more on these moves rocking the newspaper industry and its readers.
Well, it's an election tradition no more. After nearly 3 decades, the Washington Post will not endorse a presidential candidate this election cycle or any others in the future. Washington Post publisher William Lewis says the paper is, quote, returning to our roots of not endorsing presidential candidates. But an endorsement of VP Harris was ready to roll out when that announcement was made. Now, reports reveal that it was billionaire owner Jeff Bezos who personally nixed it. This didn't sit well with some members of Wapo's editorial board, with a notable staff member resigning over the decision. Now, this comes after another billionaire, LA Times owner Patrick Soon-Shiong, quashed that paper's endorsement for Harris. Now, the fallout from both papers came quickly. In a letter.
Now, the question that we want to ask ourselves before we dive deeper into this is why? The why matters. The why matters. Because on one hand, you can say, well, they squashed the endorsement because they actually support Trump, but they don't want to openly say so. And because they are the owners of these papers who would not survive without them, they have the ability and the deep pockets to be able to do so. One theory could be that they secretly support Trump and they stand for what it is that he stands for. The other theory is that they actually want to get back to being objective and reporting the facts and being real journalists so that they can create some level of integrity back for their publications and people can go back to what it is that they do, which is learning and reading about the news and then making up their minds for themselves. Or two things can be true at the same time. I believe that is both. And this is just my belief. Personally, looking at, observing, and paying attention to everything that's been going on. On the first hand, I do believe, and it's similar to what y'all was saying inside of the chat, that why would these people that make a whole bunch of money and have a huge net worth and revenue, and the majority of their net worth is tied up into unrealized gains, meaning that their net worth is how much they are worth, not necessarily how much that they have in their bank accounts. Why would they align with being taxed more with somebody that's not for the American people and is also absolutely destroying the economy and letting all of these migrants into the country? Why would they vote against their own best interests? But they can't publicly endorse Trump. And so what you do is you start to make sure that your organizations cannot and will not endorse or help to influence an election from its readers by saying that we endorse this particular candidate. At the same time, because they are businessmen, it makes sense for them to have some level of integrity come back into the organizations that they own, such as the LA Times and the Washington Post, creating more credibility for that organization by saying that we're not going to endorse a candidate, we're just going to do our job and report the news. And so I believe that two things is true in this situation, and that they do support Trump, but they don't want the public backlash to come along with it because their name is tied to whatever it is that they do for a living. I'll give you an example. I know that there are certain businesses that I'm involved in, or even corporate America and stuff like that, that I can't publicly say I'm associated with this. Why? Because not only will it affect me, it'll affect the organization that I'm a part of. Because I'm visible and I have some level of visibility that then can positively or negatively affect the organization. What I would like for the organization to be able to do, or the businesses that I'm involved in, to be able to stand on their own too, and for people to patronize the business because it's actually good at what it is that they do, and not just because I'm associated with it. When you start to tie your name to stuff, people take a position, they take a stance. And you got to know your audience and know that if people are there for this, then they can't be there for that, which would then affect the brand itself. Let's continue.
Letter of resignation, LA Times' editorials editor Marielle Garza wrote, quote, "How could we spend 8 years railing against Trump and the danger his leadership poses to the country and then fail to endorse the perfectly decent Democrat challenger?" Now, other members of the board also...
Then leave, and we'll replace you with AI or somebody younger and wants to be paid less but looking to get their foot in the door.
...resigned in protest. The lion's share of newspaper endorsements back Kamala Harris. Take a look at just a handful here. The New York Times, Boston Globe, Seattle Times, Las Vegas Sun, The New Yorker. Now, they're all in the Harris camp while Trump...
Well, we all know that because Charlemagne was just doing a podcast on The New Yorker and he was agreeing.
Most notably, the New York Post and a few others. Now, shortly after the Washington Post did an about-face on the VP, the Philadelphia Inquirer's editorial board took a stand for Kamala Harris. Now, their endorsement was as much a rallying cry for the vice president as it was an admonishment of Donald Trump. The Inquirer saying of the former president, quote, "Can we really be proud of a president who is a convicted criminal, insurrectionist, tax dodger, sexual harasser, serial liar, and Russian sympathizer?"
And that's why people are walking away from these tired newspaper organizations that is a dying entity in the first place. Meanwhile, over in New York, Eric Adams, he's starting to come out and support Trump.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I wondered if I could ask you about any communications you've been having with the Trump campaign about this rally or otherwise, and if you believe, as others have said, that the former president is a fascist.
You know, I have been had those terms hurled at me by some political leaders in the city, using terms like Hitler and fascist. My answer is no. I know what Hitler has done, and I know what a fascist regime looks like. I think, as I've called over and over again, that the level of conversation, I think we could all dial down the temperature. And I've heard people say that the former president should not be able to have a rally in Madison Square Garden. I strongly disagree. This is America. This is New York. And I think it's important that we allow individuals to exercise their right to get their message clear to New Yorkers. And our job as a city and as a police department is to make sure they can do that in a peaceful way. I think that we must be extremely cautious. The heat we turn up today, pre-election, is going to have to be the heat we're going to have to govern in. And I think we need to show a level of respectable communication. And so when people called me fascist and other terminologies, I didn't like it. And I don't think it's fitting to anyone to state that the former president is equal to being Hitler. I just think that this is a city where we have the largest Jewish population. Anti-Semitism is on the rise nationally. We need to do everything we can to push back on that level of anti-Semitic tone and anti-Semitic issues that we're facing in the city. Let's have a safe, fair, democratic process and show the globe how we're able to do it correctly.
Eric Adams, let me tell you my theory. I believe that Eric Adams, a long time ago, switched sides. I believe that Eric Adams, a long time ago, switched sides. The Democrats have abandoned Eric Adams, and not only are they abandoning him, they are going after him. And they're leveraging the Justice Department to do so. This is my belief. This is my theory. I believe that Eric Adams have completely abandoned the Democratic Party, and he is aligning himself with Trump. I also believe that Eric Adams is in trouble. And because he's not playing ball with the Democrats anymore, especially when it comes to the migrant crisis, and he hasn't been in a long time, and they don't want his endorsement, they don't want to invite him to a dinner, they don't want him to be at the Democratic National Convention, they don't want him to be anywhere near them, Eric Adams has switched sides. Eric Adams has switched sides. And yes, I believe that he is aligned with Trump. I think that he is a closet Republican now, that he had been having issues with the migrant crisis coming to New York, but they told him to play ball the minute that he didn't. I believe that they started going after him and everybody that was in his administration. And you see the fall of Eric Adams. Do I think that he's completely absolved from what he was doing? Nope, but I do think that he was part of a bigger agenda. And at the same time, I think that he's trying to get a lifeline. I don't know how big that lifeline could be, but I think that he's trying to get a lifeline. That's my theory. I'm sticking to it. Shout out to Eric Adams for practically endorsing Trump. Shout out to the Washington Post for deciding that they didn't want to endorse Kamala Harris. Shout out to everybody in New York that's showing up and showing out and actually going to vote for Trump prior to this election. We in the final stretch, ladies and gentlemen. We in the final stretch, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, we only got a few days left to the election, but it's a great time. It's a great time to be alive, all right?